Hey everybody, I am Charity, and we have been discussing different ways that you can purchase property if you're broke as fuck and have shit credit. So I've got another one for you, and it's subject to the existing mortgage. And what is that? Okay, so purchasing a property sub 2 or subject to the existing mortgage is a lot like an assumption, except that assumptions aren't a thing anymore. So when you do this, the title for the home transfers, but the loan stays in the name of the original borrower, the owner. So there's several cool things about that, or about the way this works, but there's also, this is a more risky transaction than, for example, owner financing or lease purchasing. But let's start with, like, who is your seller? Who is your seller? So your seller is going to be the individual who has a home that they want to sell or need to sell, and they don't have equity in that home. Now, why do you want that? There's a lot of reasons. We'll go over that in a little bit. But if somebody doesn't have equity, they're without a lot of choices. So this is one of the ways to relieve the burden of having a property as an owner that you just can't afford, or that is costing you money. It's draining your pocketbook. Those people are oftentimes people that are falling behind on their mortgage, or they're afraid of falling behind because their circumstances have changed. For example, job loss, divorce, you own a business and you had a real shitty year, because, like, we've all been there, right? Or anybody who owns a business has been there. Medical things, whatever situation put you in a deficit for your mortgage, where you used to be making X and now you're making Y. You used to make $10,000 a month and now you're making $7,000, and that $3,000 really makes a huge difference. Or even you're making nothing right now. Another one is a person who, like, had a job, they loved it, great, now they're transferred, and fantastic, now what are you going to do? You got to get rid of this property. So the pros to this person is going to be that this burden is gone. They do not have to worry about this house. They don't have to worry about making payments on it. They don't have to worry about maintenance and upkeep, tax and insurance, none of those things that have probably been a big thorn in their side. And if they were renting it out, they were probably also worried about keeping a tenant, making sure their tenant paid, like all the things that you worry about as a landlord. So that was probably all some stuff that was all mixed up in their stressful situation that you're taking off of them. Now, the cons to them are going to be a couple of things. One is there's this thing in every mortgage, and this is a con to you and this is a con to them. It's called a due on sale clause, meaning that technically the mortgage company has the right to call the loan or foreclose on the property if it changes title without a new purchaser acquiring a new mortgage or paying cash or whatever, the way that transactions typically work. This is why it is a riskier transaction than your typical transaction. Now, in my experience, and I've been doing this for over 20 years, in my experience, I have never seen that happen, not once. My attorney that I used to have, who passed away a few years ago, he did experience this one time, he said. And so he had a FHA loan that was called for that reason. So that's one of the things. We'll talk a little bit more about that, about ways to get around that in a few minutes, but that's one issue. Another one is that this loan stays on their credit. So if they are wanting to sell their house to buy another one, they might have to rent for a little while, at least until they can show that this now is more like a rental to them because the payment's getting made. And that's been a way that people have done in the past. I'm finding that I'm being told actually that that's more difficult now, because it's not in their name and it's not showing a positive income. So that's a little bit more difficult. So that's going to be an issue for them. So during the time they have that, they're going to have enough income to support purchasing another property. If they don't, then they are definitely going to have to wait either until their income increases or until you're able to cash them out, or something along those lines. Or, potentially, like I said, some lenders will look at the fact that that mortgage has been paid every month and say, okay, even though this belongs to you, you're not having to make the payments on it. I understand your agreement moving forward. That is a little less common though. So that is going to be one of the things. So somebody who's doing this is going to have to be somebody who's okay with living in a rental, or has enough income to purchase another property. So the pros to you here are going to be, you can purchase a home with zero red tape. Like, this is zero red tape. All you're doing is going to your attorney's office and closing it. So it's really easy. You're not having to qualify for anything. Once the deal is made, it's done. It's easy. Typically, you're not putting much cash up. There are some situations where you would have to put up more than just your closing cost. And one of those is if your seller is in the midst of a foreclosure or like a pre-foreclosure, and they're behind on their payments, you're going to have to catch those payments up. So, and that can add up really quickly with fees and interest and all of those things. So those are potentials for you to come out of pocket $10,000, $12,000 on top of your closing cost very quickly. So be prepared for that. But ordinarily, you don't have any credit qualification, and you're not going to have to put a lot of money up front. Also, you own this home. This is not like a lease purchase. This is, you own the home. It's yours, just the same as if you had gone to the bank and gotten a loan yourself, or if you paid cash for it. It is your house. So the only person that has the right to take it from you is the bank if you don't pay, or if that due on sale clause comes in. So the cons to you, again, are the due on sale clause, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. And also, typically, there's a balloon, because most people do not want to finance this house on their credit to you forever. They prefer to finance this house to you for X amount of time. And a lot of times the reason they're coming into this is because there's not a lot of equity. So a lot of times people just look at it, hey, look, as soon as there's enough equity, I want to cash out. So let's say a 5-year balloon, and then if the equity's not there in 5 years, we'll talk about it. So you're going to have an exit strategy that allows you to do that. And then another con to you also is the fact that you're going to, obviously, when you're making this purchase, this is your home. So all of the responsibilities of the home ownership come on you, which, I mean, really, when you're buying a house, you expect that. But that would include, making sure that your tenants are keeping the property up, or that you're doing maintenance and repairs as you need to. Because this is not just your house, it is your house, but it's also on the other person's mortgage. So you have a level of responsibility that's higher than other purchases. So the due on sale clause, let's talk about that. Basically, the due on sale clause is the bank's right to call the note if the title changes hands, which we've already discussed. And we've already said that nobody's done this as far as I know, but one of the ways that we're very careful about making sure that we don't raise a bunch of red flags to the mortgage company is a lot of times we'll go ahead and put the property into an LLC that we create that doesn't really sound like it's a business acquiring it as much as it sounds like it's just we're redistributing our own assets. So let's say you're buying it from Bob and Sally Jones, right? You might want to put it in the Jones Family LLC. Or let's say the address is 123 4th Street. You might want to put it in 123 4th Street LLC. This typically kind of flies under the radar and isn't that big of an issue. So we've talked about the type of person that might be interested in being a part of, like, the person who might be interested in selling you the home this way. And a good way to find those people is, I always contact landlords. You never know who is hating being a landlord. Sometimes they hate it. And so when you find a landlord that's not represented by a management company, but it's an individual, that's a good opportunity. For sale by owner homes that are for sale by owner, oftentimes are in that situation because they don't have the equity to pay for a realtor, closing costs, staging, repairs, yada, yada, all that stuff. You're coming in, you're saying, hey, look, you don't have to pay anything out of pocket. Let me just do this. So that's another good example. So your end user is going to be a lot of different things. Your end user can be you. So let's say that you are a person who's self-employed and you potentially, claim everything you can legally on your taxes, but at the end of the year, you're only claiming, let's say $40,000 and you actually make 100. But you're allowed to take these expenses off because that's one of the benefits of being self-employed, and then you still pay self-employment tax even if you made almost nothing, so there we are. If that's the case, it's hard for you to qualify for a mortgage. So this is a good opportunity for you to be able to get into the house that you are able to afford, not the one that the bank tells you can afford. Another way would be you can do an Airbnb. So if you have a property that's in a neighborhood, in an area that people are wanting to stay, great. Airbnb is great. Now, when you do this, you want to make sure that you're looking at a lot of things. You can't just be like, hey, I'm going to make an Airbnb. First off, you need to understand an Airbnb needs to be furnished, so you're going to have the capital to furnish that thing. You're also going to pay the utilities on it, and you're going to pay for cleaning and all the other things that come along with it. Toilet paper, soap, things like that. So with that, you're going to want to make sure that when you are researching Airbnbs for the area where this particular property is, you're going to look at what is the daily rate and how booked are they. So you need to make sure that on the low end of that, you're still covering all of your costs. Otherwise, you're going to put yourself in a real deficit situation real fast, and that's never fun. So a standard rental, of course, you can always just go standard rental. With a standard rental, again, easy. This is much easier. When you acquire property, let's say your payment on it's $1,000 a month, you want to make sure that the rental income for that area for a house like this is going to be at least $1,200. That way you're making at least $200. That's not a great return, but it's not a horrible return considering you're out of pocket almost zero. So that's not bad. Another one I like is a lease purchase. With a lease purchase, I typically will ask for between 5,000 and 5% of the purchase price of the property up front. With a lease purchase, you can have rents that are slightly above what your standard market rent is because they are paying into the purchase each month. Also with that, you're technically not responsible for maintenance and repair. However, if they don't do it, you still are going to want to do it. You're not going to want the house to just go to shit. And then, of course, you have owner financing. You can owner finance the house to another person, another end user. With that, you are going to get between 10 and 20% of the property value up front. You're going to get your monthly payments, which are going to be right around market rate. And then you're going to have already preset a balloon at the end of that. You don't want to owner finance somebody for the rest of their life or the rest of your life. Usually I set those between 5 and 10 years, depending on the terms I have on the property, the area, the market growth, all of those things. You'll just want to look at that yourself and figure out how you do that. So once you have that in place, now you've made your monthly income on it. Now we're coming up to the end of the time that you have a balloon for the property, and let's say it was 10 years, okay? So you've now owned this property for about 9 years. At that 9-year mark, you're going to want to start doing some things right now to make sure that you're going to be able to cash that out. Now, if you have the cash sitting in your bank account and that's the way you want to go for it. Obviously, that's a thing you can do. If you want to refinance it, that's easy peasy. You can do that. Some other things that you can do is if you look at, you can put it on the market, of course. You can put it on the market and sell it with a realtor if there's equity in the home. That's easy. But some other things that you can do is to start to look at what's happened to the value in your area. For example, north side of Richmond right now is really on fire. If you bought something over there 10 years ago, you probably paid about $70,000 for it in livable condition. Today, houses that are renovated and ready to flip are going for minimum $200,000, $250,000, up to $350,000 or higher. So you want to look at, hey, does it behoove me to flip this house? Because that's quite possible. So when you set up your lease terms and your exit strategies with your tenants or with your owner finance buyers or lease purchase buyers or any of those things, you want to make sure that you're allowing yourself about a year to figure out what your exit strategy is going to be if they don't come through. So when you have a lease purchase or an owner finance end user, 9 times out of 10, not even that, I'd say 99 times out of 100, they're not going to buy this property. They're not going to qualify because the things that kept them from qualifying the first time are typically going to be the same things that are going to keep them from qualifying now. So people are creatures of habit and don't like to change. So with that, you want to make sure that you have plenty of time. So about a year ahead, you're going to start letting them know, hey guys, it's time for us to start thinking about closing this house out. You need to make sure that your term ends a year prior. So that way, if you need to give them a couple of extra months to try to get financed, you give them a couple of extra months to try to find something else. You don't have to be the dick that kicks them out. You can really like work with them, but at some point, you're going to have to do something because you also have a responsibility, and your responsibility, of course, is to the seller, to you, because you have that mortgage to pay and you have to close this out if it's available. So back to flipping. Once you've decided that, hey, this is a better option, you can go ahead and get started on that flip and get that flip going. You have potential to make a lot of money that way. That is the way that I prefer at the end of a term. That's my preference, honestly. Obviously, we talked about, all the other things. If all else fails on that, ultimately, you can always renegotiate with your seller. So if you have a 10-year term, and let's say you bought that 10-year term, you purchased a home 10 years ago, and you purchased it in an area that has maintained value. It was like, I'm in Richmond, Virginia, so I'm going to talk about here. If you purchased that area in the West End, like in the Tuckahoe area, a lot of homes were being oversold around that time. And especially if you got it on a sub 2, a lot of times you were taking on their negative equity where the market had dropped. So even now, 10 years later, you're not in a great equity position. It's a good time to renegotiate with that seller. And you just let them know, hey, look, these are our options. Either you can take your house back and have all the worries again, or we can just continue like we've been and let's put another 5 or 10 years on here and see how we go. So that's another option that you can do. You can just amend your original contract. So those are the ways to make money, to close it out, to find your buyer, all that fun stuff. So hopefully that will help you. And I know this is a really long video, but I have to be honest, subject to is the most complicated, I think, of the actual creative finance purchase structures because there's so many moving parts and there's so many things involved. So hopefully that was helpful. And again, I'm just, we've been in quarantine all this time, so I just want to give a shout out like every day to all the people who are like unsung heroes. We always talk about the medical professionals, first responders, blah, blah, blah. But hey, how about like the person working at the grocery store? Like the person at Kroger that's taking our cash, or the person at Whole Foods that's like stocking the shelves for us. Let's talk about the person at the gas station that has to deal with our cranky butts all the time because we can't go anywhere. Let's talk about our favorite restaurants and trying to keep them open. So if you have the means to order, carry out or delivery, please do it because these people are trying to stay employed. If you have the means to get DoorDash and tip your driver, excellent. Everybody needs this. Everybody needs to work together. If you have the means to do it, do it. If you don't, hey, we're all in this together. And there's a lot of resources as well out there for those of us who maybe aren't in the same situation. So some of us are, some of us aren't. Like, some of us can order out every day, and some of us are wondering where food's coming from. And this is all of us as Americans together. So thank you all for doing whatever your part is, whether your part is donating, your part is making purchases still, whether your part is still working, or your part is just staying as far away from people as possible and washing your hands. All those things are really important, so thank you all for that. And happy quarantine, I guess. So yay, cheers. And you enjoy your day, and I hope that you find some pleasure in day drinking or binge watching Netflix or whatever you're going to do. Have a great day. Bye.